What happens when ambition turns against its own blood? The story of Absalom is one of the most gripping tragedies in the Bible, a tale of a son who rose against his father, a prince whose beauty masked a heart filled with vengeance. From the shadows of betrayal to the battlefield of rebellion, his path was paved with pride, deception, and ultimate destruction. But in the end, was it victory he found? Or ruin? The story of Absalom is one of the most dramatic and tragic accounts in the Bible, a tale of a prince blessed with beauty and charisma, yet cursed by his own ambition. It is a story of betrayal, rebellion, and ultimately divine justice. We find Absalom's story in 2 Samuel chapters 13 through 19. He was the third son of King David, the most celebrated ruler of Israel, a man after God's own heart. Yet even a mighty king could not control the storm brewing within his own household. It all began with a crime that shook the royal family. Absalom had a sister named Tamar, a woman known for her beauty and grace. But her half-brother, Amnon, the firstborn son of David, was consumed by lust for her. Instead of seeking an honorable path, he tricked and violated her, an act of shame and cruelty. 2 Samuel 13 verse 14. However, he would not heed her voice, and being stronger than she, he forced her and lay with her. Tamar, now disgraced, found refuge in Absalom's house. Her brother took her in, but inside him a fire burned. He waited 2 years, harboring silent rage against Amnon. Then the time came for revenge. Absalom devised a cunning plan, inviting his brothers, including Amnon, to a feast. In the midst of celebration, when Amnon least expected it, Absalom's servant struck him down, killing him in cold blood. The news of Amnon's murder sent shockwaves through the royal court. Fearful of David's wrath, Absalom fled to the kingdom of Geshur, where his grandfather King Talmai ruled. There he remained in exile for 3 years. David mourned both his sons, one dead, the other missing. But as time passed, his anger toward Absalom cooled. 2 Samuel 13 verse 39, and King David longed to go to Absalom, for he had been comforted concerning Amnon because he was dead. It was the cunning of Joab, David's most trusted general, that brought Absalom back. Through a wise woman from Tekoa, Joab convinced David that reconciliation was necessary. David agreed, but he would not yet see Absalom. The young prince lived in Jerusalem for 2 years without being allowed into his father's presence. Frustrated, Absalom demanded Joab's help, but Joab ignored his messages. In retaliation, Absalom set Joab's fields on fire, forcing the general to come to him. When Joab confronted him, Absalom's words were bold. "Why have I returned if I am to be treated like an outcast? If I am guilty, let the king put me to death, but if not, let me see my father." Joab relayed the message, and David finally summoned Absalom. The father and son met. David kissed Absalom in forgiveness, but was it true reconciliation? Though David forgave him, Absalom's heart had changed. He was no longer a mere prince. He wanted to be king. Absalom began a slow, calculated coup. He positioned himself at the city gates, the place where judgments were made. As the people came to present their disputes before the king, Absalom intercepted them. He flattered them, promising justice and fairness, subtly undermining David's rule. 2 Samuel 15 verse 6. In this manner Absalom acted toward all Israel who came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. After 4 years, his following was strong. He traveled to Hebron, the very place where David had once been crowned king. There he declared himself king of Israel. David, now an old man, was forced to flee Jerusalem. It was a heartbreaking moment. The same city where he had brought the Ark of the Covenant, where he had built his throne, now turned against him. As he fled, barefoot and weeping, loyal followers accompanied him. 2 Samuel 15 verse 30. So David went up by the ascent of the Mount of Olives and wept as he went up, and he had his head covered and went barefoot. Meanwhile, Absalom seized David's palace. To prove his claim to the throne, he publicly took his father's concubines, fulfilling Nathan's prophecy of David's household turning against him. 2 Samuel 12 verse 11, thus says the Lord, behold, I will raise up adversity against you from your own house. The final confrontation came in the forests of Ephraim. David's forces, led by Joab, were outnumbered but seasoned warriors. Absalom's army, though large, lacked experience. The forest became a deadly trap. More men died from the terrain than from the sword. 2 Samuel 18, verse 8, for the battle there was scattered over the face of the whole countryside, and the woods devoured more people that day than the sword devoured. Then came the turning point. Absalom, riding his mule, raced through the trees, but his pride, his long flowing hair, became his downfall. It caught in the low branches of an oak tree, and his mule kept running, leaving him suspended between heaven and earth. Then Joab arrived. Ignoring David's command to spare Absalom, he thrust 3 javelins into the prince's heart. Absalom died alone and humiliated. His body was cast into a pit and covered with stones, the burial of a traitor. When the news reached David, he was devastated. His cry was not the cry of a king, but of a grieving father. "Oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom, would God I had died for thee. Oh, Absalom, my son, my son." 2 Samuel 18, verse 33. David's sorrow was so deep that his own men were ashamed of their victory. Joab had to rebuke him, reminding him that his kingdom had been saved. Absalom had sought glory, power, and a lasting legacy, but all that remained was a nameless grave. 2 Samuel 18, verse 18, now Absalom in his lifetime had taken and set up a pillar for himself, for he said, I have no son to keep my name in remembrance. The story of Absalom is a lesson in pride, rebellion, and divine judgment. He had everything: beauty, charisma, the love of the people, but his ambition led to his downfall. Even today, in the Kidron Valley, a monument known as Absalom's Pillar stands as a reminder of this tragic prince. His story echoes through time, a warning that true greatness is not built on pride, but on humility, wisdom, and obedience to God.